Imagine. You're sitting around a fire. 100,000 years ago. Someone across from you lets one rip. A full, round, unmistakable fart. And the whole group loses it. Here's the question nobody has ever seriously asked. When did that happen for the first time? When did a human hear escaping intestinal gas and think, not danger, not disgust, but funny? Because the answer changes everything we think we know about what makes us human. Let's start with a fact that will make your entire day better. The oldest written joke in human history. The very first joke anyone ever thought was worth carving into stone and preserving for eternity, is a fart joke. Not a riddle. Not a clever wordplay. A fart joke. It comes from ancient Sumer, modern-day Iraq, written on a clay tablet around 1900 BCE. That's 4,000 years ago. The joke goes. Something which has never occurred since time immemorial. A young woman did not fart in her husband's lap. That is humanity's oldest surviving written joke. And it works exactly the same way a modern stand-up bit works. Setup. Subverted expectation. Punchline built on something completely relatable and universal. 4,000 years later, still funny. Now you might think this is a coincidence. One weird ancient scribe with a strange sense of humor. It is absolutely not. The second oldest joke ever found, also Sumerian, is about a dog who walked into a tavern and couldn't see anything because it was too short. That one's almost sweet. But right after that, more body humor. Every single time. Without exception. Ancient Egypt left us satirical artwork. Yes, an entire genre of satirical Egyptian art actually exists, where animals are drawn in human social situations doing things that are unmistakably bathroom comedy. Egyptian workers building the Valley of the Kings were passing notes to each other on limestone flakes. Some of those notes contain jokes that would get a laugh in any group chat today. Then there's ancient Greece. Aristophanes, one of the greatest playwrights in Western history, wrote a comedy called The Clouds in 423 BC where Socrates, the father of Western philosophy, gets asked whether thunder works the same way as intestinal gas. Think about what Aristophanes did there. He used the highest intellectual question of his civilization, and answered it with a fart. That is not a dumb joke wearing a smart costume. That is a smart joke wearing a dumb costume. And that distinction matters enormously. We'll come back to it. Rome gave us Emperor Claudius, an actual sitting Roman emperor, who allegedly tried to pass a law making it legal to fart at dinner. The historian Suetonius reports this. Whether it's true or not, the fact that Romans were telling this story about their emperor tells you everything about how central this humor was to their culture. So wherever there are humans, whatever the era, whatever the civilization, the fart joke survives. But that just tells us it's old. It doesn't tell us why. And the why is where this gets genuinely insane. Here's the thing nobody talks about when they explain fart humor. It's not funny because it sounds weird. It's not funny because it smells. It's funny because of when it happens. Think about the last time you genuinely laughed at a fart. It wasn't alone in your house. It was in a meeting. In a quiet classroom. In an elevator with strangers. At a funeral. At the worst possible moment your body could have chosen. And your body chose it anyway. That's the whole engine of the joke right there. Here's the biology behind it. Your gut contains roughly 100 trillion microorganisms, bacteria, fungi, archaea, that eat the food you can't digest yourself. They produce gas as a byproduct. Carbon dioxide, methane, hydrogen. Every single day your body produces up to 2 liters of that gas. The average person releases it 10 to 25 times daily. That is the medically normal range. If you're not hitting that, something is actually wrong with you. Now here's the critical part. The exit is involuntary. You can be in the most important moment of your professional life. Job interview. Big presentation. First date. And your gut microbiome, which has never once heard of social norms, will do exactly what it wants. At a volume you did not request. At a pitch you absolutely did not authorize. And that involuntary quality, the body overriding the social self, is everything. Because every single day you are performing a version of yourself for the world. What you wear, how you speak, the expression on your face. You are constantly, exhaustingly constructing a social identity and projecting it outward. And then, in one unmistakable acoustic moment, your biology reminds everyone in the room what you actually are underneath all of that. A warm, biological creature with 100 trillion microorganisms inside you who answer to nobody. That gap between the person you're trying to be and the animal you actually are? That's the joke. That's always been the joke. And it's been funny for exactly as long as humans have been trying to look dignified. Which, as we're about to find out, is a lot longer than you think. Psychologists and philosophers have been arguing about why things are funny for centuries. And they've come up with three main theories. Fart humor passes all three simultaneously, which almost never happens. Theory 1. Relief. Freud's argument, the part that actually holds up, is that humor releases suppressed tension. Something is forbidden. Social pressure is holding it down. The joke gives everyone a safe moment to acknowledge the forbidden thing without being punished for it. Flatulence is taught as private from childhood in every culture ever studied. That rule creates constant low-level social tension. When the fart happens in public anyway, that tension releases. Instantly. Involuntarily. The laughter is the pressure valve. Theory 2. Superiority. Going back to Aristotle. We laugh when something briefly levels the playing field. When the most important seeming person in the room becomes suddenly, undeniably, acoustically human. Nobody is too important to fart. No amount of money, status, or professional credibility makes your intestinal biology optional. And the moment that gets demonstrated publicly, everyone in the room experiences a flash of equality. The Sumerian scribe understood this. Aristophanes understood this. Medieval court jesters used fart humor specifically against kings. You can't mock a king directly and survive. But you can fart near him and watch the room decide whether to laugh. Theory 3. Incongruity. Your brain is constantly predicting what happens next. Humor fires when those predictions are violated in a specific, safe, non-threatening way. You were in a meeting, maintaining a professional identity. Your brain had a complete model of how the next 10 minutes would go. And then your body introduced a sound that belongs in an entirely different context. That collision of contexts, that gap between what your brain predicted and what actually happened, is the neurological signal we experience as funny. 3 theories. 3 checkboxes. All 3 at once. That's why fart humor doesn't need setup. Doesn't need shared language. Doesn't need cultural context. Doesn't need to be explained to anyone anywhere. The ingredients: social self-presentation, biological reality, the gap between them, and a brain wired to find that gap funny. Those ingredients are in every human being who has ever lived. But here's what nobody has ever seriously investigated. When did those ingredients first combine? How far back does this actually go? Because the answer is not 4,000 years. Not 40,000 years. Not even 100,000 years. What comes next should genuinely stop you. Because the science of laughter, real laughter, the kind that makes your stomach hurt, is at least 10 million years old. It predates our species entirely. And when researchers started studying what our closest living relatives do when their bodies betray them in social situations, they found something that changes the entire timeline of this question. In 2009, a researcher at the University of Portsmouth named Robert Provini recorded something that deserved far more headlines than it got. He studied what happens to great apes, chimpanzees, gorillas, bonobos, orangutans, specifically during social play. During tickling. During roughhousing, what he found was laughter. Not metaphorical laughter. Not laughter-like behavior. Actual laughter. Rhythmic, breathy, exhalation-based vocalizations produced in response to social play and unexpected situations. The sound is slightly different from human laughter. Chimps laugh on both inhale and exhale. We laugh mostly on exhale, but the function is identical. Same social trigger. Same physical mechanism. Same role in the group. Laughter is not a human invention. It is at least 10 million years old. It evolved in the common primate ancestor long before Homo sapiens arrived. Now here's the part that connects directly to your title. Primatologists studying chimpanzee social behavior have documented what happens when a chimp produces intestinal gas in a group setting. And the social reaction among nearby chimps? Quick glancing. Avoidance. The body language of trying to maintain composure. The social awkwardness of flatulence in a group context is not uniquely human. It appears in our closest living relatives. Which almost certainly means it appeared in our common ancestor. Which means the raw ingredients of fart humor, social awareness of the body, the gap between social presentation and biological reality, laughter already wired into the primate brain. All of it was present before the first human being ever sat around a fire. We cannot know the exact moment. Laughter doesn't fossilize. We can't interview a Neanderthal. But we have cave art going back 45,000 years, minds that understood beauty, narrative, symbolism. We have bone flutes from 40,000 years ago, beings who made music because it felt good. We have burial sites 100,000 years old where the dead were arranged with care and ceremony, groups that felt grief, love, individual identity. These are not the behaviors of creatures who never laughed. And if they laughed, which everything suggests they did, then they laughed at what was in front of them. Around the fire. After a meal of wild legumes and unprocessed roots that would put modern gas production to shame. The setup was always there. The punchline was always the same. The question isn't whether ancient humans found this funny. The question is how could they possibly not have? Here's the part nobody talks about. It's not just about the laugh. It's about the flush. That involuntary reddening of the face. That wish, powerful, instant, completely useless, that the ground would open up right now and end this. Embarrassment is one of the most sophisticated emotions in the human toolkit. And it turns out it might be one of the most important ones. Here's why. Embarrassment requires a very specific set of cognitive ingredients. You have to know that other people have mental states. You have to know those mental states are directed at you right now. And you have to be able to see yourself from the outside, to watch yourself as others are watching you, and register the gap between who you were presenting as and what just happened. This is called theory of mind. The ability to model another person's perspective. As far as we can determine, only humans have it in its full form. When you fart in public and your face goes red, that blush is your brain running a real-time social calculation. It's computing the gap. And then it's broadcasting to everyone in the room. I know. I know what happened. I know you know. And I'm aware of the gap. The blush is a form of apology. A signal that the social contract was violated and that you are fully, painfully conscious of it. And here's what researchers at Berkeley found. People who visibly blush when embarrassed are consistently rated as more trustworthy, more likable, and more socially aware than people who don't. The blush signals authenticity. It says you have a genuine social self. That you care about the group. Which means the embarrassed farter is demonstrating emotional intelligence. And the group that laughs with them, not cruelly, but in that warm shared recognition of collective absurdity, is doing something psychologists classify as genuinely prosocial. What that laughter says is, your body just betrayed you in front of all of us. We all maintain the same fiction every day. The fiction just got punctured. And instead of pretending it didn't happen, we're all going to acknowledge it together and be closer for it. That is what fart humor has always done in a social group. It is not lowbrow. It is, if you follow the science, a surprisingly sophisticated act of communal trust. You only let that laugh out fully and genuinely with people you trust enough to be your biological self around. The fart joke is, in its deepest function, an act of intimacy. Here's the thing that seals this question permanently. Wherever researchers have studied human cultures, any culture, any era, any continent, fart humor is there. Without a single exception. Ancient Egypt. Ancient Greece. Ancient Rome. Ancient India's Natya Shastra, a foundational theatrical text from 200 BCE, explicitly lists bodily flatulence humor as a recognized and legitimate comedic category. Medieval Japan gave us the Higassen scroll, an elaborate, compositionally sophisticated painting of a competitive farting tournament used as political satire against public officials. That is a real object currently sitting in a museum. Indigenous oral traditions across the Americas. Aboriginal Australian cultural traditions going back 50,000 years. Medieval Islamic scholarly texts. Every trickster figure in every mythology on every continent deploys bodily humor as a tool of social leveling. The universality is total. And universality in human behavior, as any evolutionary biologist will tell you, is one of the strongest possible signals that something is not culturally learned but biologically encoded. It isn't something we teach each other. It's something every group of humans arrives at independently because the wiring that produces it is in all of us, everywhere, without exception. The joke isn't cultural. The joke is human. So, when did humans realize farts were funny? Probably before we were fully human. The capacity for laughter is at least 10 million years old. The social awkwardness of bodily functions in group settings appears in our closest primate relatives. By the time modern humans existed, sitting around fires, with full self-awareness, with a brain wired to find the gap between dignity and biology hilarious, the joke had been set up for millions of years. The oldest written evidence is 4,000 years old. But writing is only 5,000 years old. The joke itself is almost certainly older than writing. The Sumerian scribe who carved that clay tablet wasn't inventing something. He was just the first person who thought it was worth preserving forever. And he was right. Because underneath everything, the titles, the clothes, the reputations, the carefully maintained social selves, we are all the same warm, biological, involuntary creatures sharing space with 100 trillion microorganisms who have never once cared about our professional image. That's not a tragedy. That's not something to be embarrassed about. That is the oldest joke in the world. And based on the historical record, it will outlast everything else we have ever created. Now, drop your most embarrassing public fart story in the comments. The Sumerians normalized this 4,000 years ago. You're in very good company. And if you want more of the ancient history nobody ever talks about, it's right there. See you in the next one.